society just doesn't have an answer for. So obviously my content is shifting as
Mhm.
such, and this kind of podcast has kind of come in, and we're doing kind of overlaps and just adding some value that way, which is great. And obviously back for the second week, so
Mhm.
looking good.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm now sort of going into helping successful founders that kind of want to overcome mental blocks. And this is me fitting it into a more niched area, but obviously doesn't then technically stop me working with other people outside of that because of the mental block side. And then what we're looking to do is so that they can then execute flawlessly under pressure, and then they can scale their business with certainty. But obviously, those elements are interchangeable. So you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to be a founder to have mental blocks. You don't have to necessarily be a founder to be able to execute flawlessly, because once we work with the individual and the self, we're using these same concepts and we're using these same learnings and teachings and all of this wider wisdom
Mhm.
to get the individual to execute flawlessly in their day-to-day life from a place of alignment and a place from aligned living. And then that in itself allows them to then show up with certainty and therefore on purpose and deliberate action. And then you can kind of complete that loop and that cycle that way. But most of my messaging now is potentially shifting over to more business minded people. But that's because that's just an area that I can access relatively well. And it's kind of encompassing more of my background in sort of chartered accountancy and my business and my higher level management skills. So it's an area that I can walk into and feel as though
Comfortable.
I'm sort of
That's why
comfortable at
I've
that
done
level myself.
entrepreneurs. Yeah, that's why I did
Mhm.
entrepreneurs because I obviously being an entrepreneur. But I mean, there's an age bracket as well because it's like it could be procrastination kind of at university and doing, it could be
Yep.
anything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Be future founders
So
or
I mean, you could
founder
have
or
somebody just
entrepreneurs,
coming out.
same kind of thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You
So we've
call
got
it
people that are
founders.
coming out of university, but clearly they're just starting their journey. So they're not necessarily going to be in the position to understand anything other than, and this isn't a sort of a reflection on anything other than the stage that they're at,
Hmm.
other than kind of, well, how do I physically set up a business?
Hmm.
Once you've set up a business and once you've started that part of the journey and obviously enjoyed that sort of creation element itself, you then get into this section whereby you start realizing that your mental blocks are going to cause you a problem. And it could be limiting beliefs, it could be structural, it could be you thinking outside the box and being more creative, but then having a block from childhood that then potentially is stopping you from imagining sort of this bigger picture. But then you can have self-worth, self-value, and then after a while you get to the stage of coming out of the business growth from a physical application implementation perspective, and then you step more into kind of this, hold on, there's something working in behind the scenes, and it's me as the magician, and it's me as the architect, and it's me as the kind of founder that is then kind of becoming the bottleneck in the business. And then what you do is you start having to transition from the systems into more of the automation. And then it's that switch over that you get to that it's like, well, hold on, I need to be doing something other than just practical application here. So we're tying all of that in across all areas, but obviously when we deliver it, different people associate with different things.
Hmm.
But you could have a mental block that's, well, I'm not creative, but yet there's a load of evidence to suggest that you are. But when you were a child, it was like, well, hold on, I'm going out and I'm having fun and I'm finding new ways and I'm jumping in muddy puddles and I'm climbing trees until the point of somebody told you that you're not allowed to do it because it's unsafe.
Hmm.
And that could be something that's then holding you back in business because it's like, well, hold on, if I take this next leap, if I jump out of my comfort zone into what is this murky kind of unknown area, then hold on, where am I sort of going from here? And then it's that voice in the back of the head that has been there for all these years.
Hmm.
And it's, oh, well, hold on, I can't do it now. But then you can have that tide, and then every moment beyond that point of the original event is then folding back in on itself, and you've created neural pathways and ways of being and surviving and coping that then fold back in to then mean that you can't move forward when you absolutely want to and you've got all the drive and all the passion to. And then what we're doing is we're bridging that gap so you can step over that and then come into that more aligned existence and then start creating.
Yeah. So it's just like having a habit, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
that's the comfortable, and then to push yourself out
Hmm.
into. the uncomfortable,
Yeah.
basically, which is basically making new neural pathways.
Yep.
But yes, but it's the excitement of an idea and pushing forward generally that entrepreneurs, and founders, it's the
Mm.
idea that pushes them forward, isn't it? And then they just kind of get there and then get other people to do this. But when you're having a business on your own, it's yeah, there are kind of blockages. But if you have people in place to help you, it just depends on how it's set up, doesn't it? And how much
I
resource you
mean,
have.
yeah, the entrepreneurial journey is different.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like the hero's journey that everybody goes through. So obviously you grow up, you go off, you go and have all of that experience, and you then come back better is kind of the generalization of it. But obviously you can look up hero's journey if you want to sort of see what part of your path that you're actually on. But individuals will have their own life lessons, life learning, soul development, soul growth, and soul learnings. And it can manifest in any way, shape, or form. I mean, something that's relevant to you could be, well, hold on, entrepreneurial kind of background because
Hmm.
it's family, but then you might find that you've got no family background in that area and it's something you've always wanted to do, but then you're a curse breaker or you're a cycle breaker and you're going off into this new path that's solely designed for your growth, but you've had to overcome all of these obstacles and hurdles to get to the point of, well, how am I now expanding? And how am I going off into that wider world in order to then get my own experiences to then ultimately find out who am I above all the conditioning, the patterns, the habits, and the behaviors. And the entrepreneurial journey is going to basically ramp all of that up. You're not going to have the standard, well, hold on, my life's playing out in a certain way. It's going to be, well, all of your darkest fears, all of your biggest worries, all of your concerns are going to be literally at any point in time able to pop in through the
Hmm.
business structure because ultimately the business becomes an extension of self. And that
Well, the
extension of
resilience,
self,
isn't it? To stay
exactly.
in the moment
Mhm.
and not be swayed and to take
Yeah.
that fear and make it excitement or drive and just have the skill to know how to do that, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we look at fear the wrong way.
Hmm.
So, a lot of the time, fear is just you pushing your own boundaries. And by that, we're looking at boundaries as not how you do things, we're looking at the extent to which you choose to do things.
Hmm.
So your boundaries are clearly where you set them based on all of this conditioning from previous, and all you're doing is you're looking to push it. But once you push that boundary out, you don't know necessarily what's on the other side of it.
Hmm.
So it might be a case of there is instant gratification, i.e., you've taken this step, great. And then after that first step and the instant gratification, you get very little, if anything. So it just becomes this void and this silence whereby you have to catch up and you have to recalibrate. And that's at cellular level, because obviously you're now stepping into this new identity, this new person, this new being, this new experience. But yet your body has to catch up, and that's heavy and dense and takes time. Whereas you've then got the physical manifestation, which also is heavy, dense, and takes time. But yet you mentally and emotionally are further ahead because you've now stepped out and because you've now pushed that barrier. So then you've got this kind of lag and delay and this push pull slinky effect, which is then like, well, hold on, I'm pushing this boundary mentally, i.e., my imagination and my thoughts and the way I act and how I feel. But everything else then has to kind of catch up, if that makes sense. So when we look at fear, we look at it from a case of, well, hold on, it's a safety mechanism. And this is a primal reptilian instinct that is designed to keep us safe. It's like you don't want to go somewhere where you don't know because, well, what happens if something bad happens? Whereas what we find is these days, we're not coming at it from that place. We're coming at it from false evidence, it's appearing real, so FEAR, or
Hmm.
false experiences appearing real. And those two usually fall into like the general categorization. So you can either have a false experience
Mm.
or you can have the opposite. But usually it's the other way round. So what you have is you have this evidence that you were told by somebody, that you were brought to awareness of by somebody, but then that's their own limitation, which has then become your limitation, which isn't actually your limitation. It's designed to keep you comfortable and keep you stuck so that you're not then going off and doing all this weird, wacky, wonderful stuff with your life, and then hold on, the mirror is on the other person as to what they haven't done with their life. And then it's a safety mechanism from this other person because they don't want to be shown that, hold on, they're not doing anything with their life. They don't want to be shown that there's more they could have been doing with their life because what does that do to a person? It challenges their identity. It causes them a problem and causes them to look at themselves through this other perspective. So it's easier for somebody to keep you stuck and in this role or in this kind of bubble than it is for them to realize that, hold on, they're not doing something that potentially they could and should and would have been doing otherwise. And then that in itself is a whole kind of,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, where do you start with this then? So you get them in, and then we be doing NLP with them, or just coaching questions, or what, or is it hypnotherapy?
So
Just go
every
with it.
individual is specific. So if
Yeah.
you have a preferred modality, I've got access to quite a few. So like you say, I can do kind of Reiki as in energy healing. I can do hypnotherapy if somebody's kind of interested, or if they're tentatively blocking and need to get out of the way of themselves. So usually we're talking about the conscious and the subconscious. The
Yeah.
conscious will always go, well, hold on, there's a problem here, we need to override it. But the same conscious is overriding the subconscious. So we need access to it, either or. So we either need to bypass the conscious to get to the subconscious to then inform the conscious, or we need to use the conscious actively to then start exposing and repeating to then train the subconscious onto a different set of behaviors. But the work that I do does both. So we're technically burning the candle at both ends of the stick. And because we're doing both ends of the stick, then it allows us to get to the root cause quicker because we're going to the what's in the subconscious, but we're also going to train the conscious with that subconscious. So we've got the
The
conscious doing it.
subconscious kind of does what it's told, doesn't it? If you tell it, the kind of hypno speak is
Mhm.
it kind of instructs it, and it just kind of it's obedient once you're in
Yes,
there, isn't it?
because we have to remember it's stuck at age 7. So for your first 7 years of life,
Yeah.
you're basically like a sponge. You absorb and you take everything in, right? You're not sat there going, how do I filter this? Is it right for me? Is it good or bad? Should I be taking it in? You're not able to do that because you have to trust that your surroundings, i.e., parents, caregivers, your environment is safe. So at that
And
point,
you
you either
have your
make
best interest.
yourself safe or you
Right.
make yourself unsafe in order to make the external safe or unsafe. And then what we do is we have 0 to 7 is where you've basically been programmed. So if you were inputting code into a computer, it's like, this is the source code.
Hmm.
And this source code then follows me throughout the rest of my life, unless I start reprogramming it from a place of knowing what it is to begin with. And a lot of people don't even know what they're running to begin with. So you go day to day and it's on autopilot. 95% of your life is, I don't have to think about it. I can get up and I can just
Hmm.
do. But then what we're looking at is how do we change the doing to being? And how we change the doing to being is by going back, understanding what's in there, and making better choices. And those choices then allow us to have other experiences that are outside of the generational trauma, the generational kind of lineage patterns, the bloodline structures. Because we're designed then to go, well, hold on, we can think differently, therefore we can act differently. If we can think and act differently, we can also feel differently, and then we can use that as a guidance system to create a different reality. So we're tying all of this stuff back in to eventually go, well, hold on, who am I? And who is this person? And how do they show up? Because
It
that
works
person
both
shows up
ways. So you
differently.
can act it and then feel it, or you can
Yep.
feel it and then
Yep.
that changes your action. So.
So ideally, we want to be nailing all three of those components. The way we think, act, and feel should be aligned.
Mhm.
But your thoughts are going to be conflicted for a
Mhm.
number of reasons. You're going to have your own desires. You're going to have your own wants. You're going to have your own idea of what you should be doing with your life. However, the way you're currently thinking is based on how you were conditioned to think based on other people's limitations when you were growing up
Hmm.
and your surroundings. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to make yourself unsafe and challenge those beliefs, challenge those thoughts. But then all that does is over time, it leads to you having headaches, migraines, cluster headaches. Because ultimately, you've got these voices in your head that are going back and forward. Hold on, we want to do all of this good stuff, but mum said, hold on, I want to do all of this good stuff, but dad told me this wasn't
I never
possible,
get headaches. My husband gets
right?
really bad migraines all the time,
Yeah.
and my daughter as well. So I thought it's like a genetic thing. My
So
son
it's,
also gets a few headaches, but I mean, I never get headaches.
yeah,
I don't drink
but
now as
we,
well. So,
but we've got to the point where we're told that it's genetic. And the
right,
only reason it's genetic is because of the cellular memory that's passed down through the DNA.
right.
So somebody hasn't resolved something,
Hmm.
somebody hasn't dealt with it, and therefore it's energetically in their system.
So you can extract that energy through the Reiki if you wanted to, and fix
You
headaches, lining
we
the
don't we don't
energy.
e- we don't even need to overcomplicate it that way. So Reiki can give you a bit of relief. Reiki can obviously open these things up so they can present to you in real life. But ultimately, if you're going to go and say, well, hold on, Reiki is just taking the energy out, that's not what Reiki does on a higher level.
Hmm.
Reiki is designed to balance the chakra or balance the meridians.
Hmm.
And then what happens is because they're balanced, they can't hold the frequency they held before. So what that does is it technically shakes everything out. And then what you'll do is you'll present yourself with opportunities in life to then go and deal with the mental constructs and the emotional constructs that are attached to that alignment of your chakras. So
Right.
it's kind of going back up the scale. So what we're doing is we're setting the chakra up so it operates optimally. Anything now that isn't optimal then comes up in the real world for you to process, be it a mental, be it an emotional, or be it kind of a physical element. And what we're then doing is we're having to go backwards to then deal with those things after the alignment. And the problem you have with that way round is you constantly need to go back for further Reiki. Because what happens if you don't deal with this problem, or you get triggered again, or mentally you kind of freeze and then you get the fawn response? Now all of a sudden you've put that back in and you've disrupted the flow of that chakra. So now you've had it aligned, but it's now out of alignment because you haven't still been able to process it, which is why we say the body stores the sort of,
Pizza school.
yeah, the score.
Hmm.
So because we've then got that, we have to try and do it the other way round. So we're not using the back end process whereby we align it and then we expect everything else to play out and then we correct it as we go. What
Hmm.
we're doing is we're going, well, hold on, how do I sort the mental structure out? And then all of the emotional and the physical elements will naturally align themselves. Because what we're then doing is we're going, hold on, if I'm thinking this way and these thoughts are somebody else's, then I've now got chatter back and forward in my head. So some people say it's the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder, right? But the reality of that is if you've done any of your own work, you shouldn't be experiencing headaches at all because you should be going down the path of I'm more aligned, therefore I'm healing, therefore I'm creating a life that is my life, not somebody else's, whereby I'm constantly do I, don't I, should I, shouldn't I, will I, won't I. Mum said, dad said, Nan always told me that this wasn't possible for anybody, therefore I took that as fact. Or granddad always told me that like the sky was the limit. Well, that's still a limit, even if it's like now where do you place the sky,
Hmm.
right? So it's different ways and shapes and all of these things. But usually if you've got headaches, you have an opposing entry whereby you're fighting and battling yourself. So you don't have that ability then to execute because it's always a one step forward, two steps back. And then what we have to do is we have to look at the individual's specific circumstances as to what is that chatter that's going on in their head. Where do they say they want to do something, but they literally have no way of getting there because of all these other things in the background?
It's a
And then we
tiny
have,
percentage, isn't it, of people that would even
yeah,
try and do this or even believe in
yep,
this because they think it's kind of woo-woo, don't they?
yeah. But then the opposing entry is what? You go to a doctor, you take tablets, you
And
take
they
pills.
take so many pills. They're on strong pills. So it's
And what does that do? It
that
covers
just
up
covers it up.
the mechanism that is telling you you have a problem.
Yeah.
So it's going, right, the body wants to heal, the body wants to show up, the body wants to go, look, we need to deal with this because otherwise we're carrying it for the next however many lifetimes. And then even worse, if we have kids, it's in our cellular memory and it's getting passed on to them because then they're going to have that cellular memory naturally from birth. So they're going to grow up with this I can't do energy, with this conflict energy, with this voices going back and forward in their head. But then you're going to teach them it anyway because you haven't yet dealt with it as the parent, because they're then going to come in and they're going to challenge you because they're going to have this energy in their body from birth that's going to go, this shouldn't be here. So they're going to go, I don't want to do this. Hold on, why are you doing this? And then you're going to go and shut it down and then enforce the fact that the cellular memory is already in there, rather than both of you having the opportunity then, as parent and child, to clear both ends of that spectrum and therefore put a stop to it for the next generation from a cellular perspective. It doesn't obviously stop you having experiences that then put you back into it, but you, as a one generation above the other, can put a stop to it based on your own healing and your own development. But then what we don't want to be doing is going, well, hold on, the body's basically got an alarm system going on and we're taking tablets. The body's got an alarm system going on, but we're ignoring it and we've
Try
shut
and
it
play
down
something.
and
Yeah.
we've numbed and we've done all this other stuff because it will start whispering. It will then get louder and louder. And then at some point, it will start shouting. And at that point, it's too late. So we're looking to evolve and kind of avoid all of that structure.
So your niche would be really to remove physical pain as
So
well.
that's, yeah, that's the ideal kind of structure that we're looking at. The
Right.
person can show up without distortion,
Hmm.
or rather dis-ease. But we're
Hmm.
not looking at dis-ease as in like an illness. We're looking at not being in a place of harmony or balance or healing.
Hmm.
We're talking anything that disrupts that equilibrium, right? But the term that we used is some big horrible plague thing that's going to do destroy and destruct and oh, it's bad and everything. No, 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 you're just not in a place of balance.
Hmm.
So something is off. It's like a weighing scale that's slightly higher than the other one. All you're then doing is going, well, hold on, something in my body is not quite aligned. So let me go and look for it. But then I've got signs. Is it the right side? Is it the left side? Is it the upper or the lower part of the body? Is there something generational? Is it in the bloodline? Is there some unknown event that happened at some point in time that's being passed down? How's that then projected externally? How's it reflected back to me so I can deal with it internally? And then you have all of these other perspectives that then mean that regardless of what it is, even if it is a physical ailment, right?
Hmm.
That's that's the screaming element that we discussed earlier. It's been there for so long that you have to now present with it. And then at that point, it's like, well, hold on, you need surgery. Right. That now gets rid of it in that form. However, it doesn't stop it coming back in a different form because you didn't pick up the original message.
Hmm.
But usually at that point, it's a 50-50. It's like, do you transition and therefore have a different character, a different life? And that's what we refer to as death, or does that surgery get reversed beforehand, which we're not seeing, or do we get to the point where we have the surgery and then it comes back, or do we have the surgery and it comes back in a different form and we don't associate it? And then we're looking at, well, how do we alleviate that whole imbalance so that we can literally not have pain, and that pain no longer needs to guide us. And if that guidance isn't there, then we have our own intuition. Now that's functioning. Now we can navigate through life from a place of alignment, not through a place of misguidance and misdirection. And that's all we're doing.
So
Whenever we
if,
have the pain,
yeah. So if you're using Reiki,
mhm.
is there like a physical what happens? Do you pull the bad energy out, or do you
So what we're
do
doing
you
is
remove it?
we're being a conduit and we're bridging the gap between consciousness and unconsciousness. But what we do is we obviously activate the hand chakras,
Hmm.
and then obviously in holding those over the person, you can work out where there's imbalances in energy. So you'll find that it's kind of there's a depth or a distinct gap between the two. So I
And there's
think
the heat that you can feel, is that?
yeah, and that's just the energy transfer that's then basically aligning from a higher intelligence. And then that higher intelligence is then what we align with in order to get rid of the lower frequencies and the lower intelligence, which is all of this conditioning that isn't ours.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of that, we're then getting all of this heat transfer because obviously it's an energy exchange and energy is only ever transferred, it's never lost.
Okay,
So
so
we have to have it
that
in
energy
some.
comes into your hand then. Is that
So it goes through you rather than into you. A lot of Reiki
okay?
practitioners, if they're starting out, they go, "Oh, it's draining me.
That's right.
It's causing me a problem." Part of that is their own calibration.
Hmm.
Part of that is them aligning themselves at the same time as aligning others. But then a lot of it is the fact that they don't realize that they can allow it to flow through, and therefore there's some resistance. Whereas when you've been doing it for a while, you can literally sense energy and you can bounce energy off because you yourself are basically raising your frequency, and anything that isn't that frequency kind of has a bounce effect off you. So you
Right.
can then work out that you're just channeling and flowing energy through rather than having to control it, restrict it, and funnel it as if you're doing it. You realize there's a higher consciousness at play. And that is all you're doing. You're just becoming that conduit to allow that to come through. So you're becoming the bridge once again between the higher and the lower realms. So as above, so below.
So it kind
And
of
it's
comes
that,
through and then just goes off somewhere.
yeah. Yeah. So what you're doing is going, I'm an open kind of channel or an
Mhm.
open funnel or an open source. And if you want to bring something from here down, then okay, do it through me. And this comes back to the concept we said the other day. It's like victim is it's happening to me. Now it's happening for me. Now it's happening by me. Now it's happening through me. So now I'm creating as the creator, as the architect, rather than as somebody who's kind of just fumbling their way through life, which is what we're all doing from birth, basically, until we get to a point where something twigs and it's like, hold on, there's something else at play here.
Right. Okay. I love I love all the bit about the kind of afterlife stuff.
Yeah,
Do you want to talk about your kind of what you were talking about before when your children were born and
I can do. Yeah,
energy
so
and yeah, what you were helping the midwife, weren't you, or you knew about?
yeah, so obviously for those that know, I've got four boys. Obviously, they don't live with me
Right.
at the minute; they live with their mums.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm off doing all this weird, wacky, wonderful stuff that
Yeah.
kind of they don't need me for as yet. So based on that, we
So how old
had
are your boys?
so I've got two that are older. So one of them is 12. One of them is then coming up to what would be in January? It will be 9.
Right.
So there's only like a 3-year gap between the two of them.
Yeah.
And then I've got two younger boys that are twins, so they're coming up to 3.
Oh,
And basically, obviously, they're off doing their own weird, wacky, wonderful things in life.
right.
But that then means that kind of those experiences that I had with them early were designed for obviously my own growth and my own development. And then that kind of set me up for some of this work that clearly I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So with the older two boys, obviously my eldest had a cord wrapped around his neck twice and around his arm once. And at the time, obviously I didn't know an awful lot about this, but clearly afterwards it became apparent. So the event in this lifetime was my ability to read obviously all the monitors and to watch and analyze and to kind of dissect where everything is kind of going off and there's a lot of stuff happening and there's a lot of numbers, but underlying obviously this energy signature where obviously everything that's connected will always be connected. So when you have these dips and these drops, you kind of start looking at it thinking, well, hold on, we need to do something. And at some point, it dropped to a point where it was a drop in energy as well as a drop in a number on a screen. And because I could pick that up from my own work that I had been doing the years prior, then it became apparent that obviously I had to then sort of go, well, hold on, we need to start doing something. And it wasn't like oh, hold on, why isn't anybody doing something? It was a case of, well, I need to say this, and it's if I don't say this, then something bad's going to happen. But it's that kind of inner feeling that comes up, and it's like there's something wrong. And basically, at that point, we didn't know that there was a cord twice around the neck and once around the arm, but there was just a fluctuation on the actual screen. But then that then led to a C-section, and basically, then we found out obviously it was twice around the neck and once around the arm. So there was no way that that could have been a natural birth. So what then happens is you've got this whole, there's the birthing process, and there's this disturbance or this disruption or this resistance to that birthing process. And then the energy around that is giving off this signature. So at that point, you've got mum obviously in a position of, well, hold on, something could go wrong here because she's trying to protect the baby. The baby's trying to protect the baby. And then something needs to come in that then allows everybody then to have that relief and have that kind of experience that doesn't then create the problem. So once that then happened, it then became apparent that obviously we had this physical thing. So there was no way that that could happen normally for whatever the reason is behind the scenes. But it could be something as simple as mum didn't want to have the early kind of birthing process, or mum wasn't ready to have that experience, or mum chose not to have that experience. And then the flip side of it is obviously baby didn't want to come in naturally, or baby didn't want to have the experience that was the whole birthing experience. And then between the two of them, they've created this cord around the neck twice and arm once to mean that the way that baby wanted to come in, or mum wanted to have baby, then gets met through that exchange.
Right.
So obviously at that point, I didn't know a lot about it. But then the 3 and a bit years in between, since then, was a case of my own journey started unraveling. And then from 2016 onwards, so obviously the eldest was born in 2013, I started having all of these physical breakdowns in my own body. And then that led itself to like my own spiritual awakening, my own kind of pools of wisdom and everything else. And during that 3 years, I was uncovering things like, well, hold on, I have a background in midwifery that dates back to like the 1400s, and I was clearing my own kind of
How did you
karma.
find that out? How did you know? Was it a dream or something? Or
So yeah, it's you can have dreams, but then you can have thoughts that pop into your mind that then lead you down some train that then leads somewhere, and you're kind of going, well, hold on, I can run this experience through my head, or there's something like, well, hold on, this person at this time, or this thing in this lifetime reminds me of something from a past lifetime. And then if you review the events in this lifetime and then get something that wasn't the event in this lifetime, you realize that, hold on, if I haven't had it in this lifetime yet, then it must be a past lifetime. And then you can tie it back to like clothes and sort of eras and sort of when you get visuals. So it's not necessarily a dream, or it's not necessarily like you doing any sort of hypnosis or anything like that, but you get kind of imagery. Like you could see
pictures?
yourself, yeah, you could see yourself stood there with like a scalpel or something like, and you're like, well, hold on, this isn't this timeline. This is kind of really old. So you then can place it roughly that way. And it then worked out that obviously I was doing a lot of work in past lifetimes along the childbirth route, which is why in this lifetime I've helped a lady obviously have birth in this lifetime when she had a problem, but I'll briefly touch on that slightly later. So I've got that background, and it's like, well, why are these experiences that are seemingly random coming up in this lifetime? And it's because of my past lifetimes and balancing some karma. So if
Right.
something didn't play out right or didn't work correctly or didn't go to plan, then it's balancing that and then obviously offsetting people karmically in this lifetime to then bring that balance. So that then led me on to obviously baby number two. And with that one, I ended up with I think I fainted during one of the procedures. So you know when they obviously have the epidural in the lower back. So I
I've
ended
never
up,
had epidurals actually.
yeah. So obviously it's just the numbing of the
Yeah.
lower part of the body, and
Hmm.
this then becomes relevant later on for the next stage, but I'll
Mm.
cover that at that point. So it basically got to the point where I was sat there and I was obviously very close, but it's not like I'm worried about obviously the needles going in or I'm kind of fearing all blood and all this other stuff. But what happened is they failed to do the needle on multiple occasions. So what was happening is obviously mum at the time was having all of these kind of needles stuck in the back and it was bruising and it was painful and it was uncomfortable.
It's
But what I
quite dangerous
realized,
epidurals into the
yeah,
spine, which is why we
and
do it. I mean, they
exactly,
read your rights, don't they, and say this could
yeah.
end
And
badly.
what I believe now was happening at the time that I didn't know way back when was that actually my energy was protecting all of like that environment that I was in. So obviously, if you're within like 23 feet of somebody, you're technically in their field or their aura. So
Right.
what my energy was doing was actually making it less painful. But then what I'd not done at the time is I hadn't prepared myself and I hadn't looked after myself enough. So obviously I got up that morning, didn't have breakfast, didn't kind of get ready because it was relatively early and we had to obviously go in. And what I was then doing is because I was shielding and protecting that energy, then it meant that my energy system got overloaded and I wasn't looking after myself for a lot of that period of time. And then what it did is it meant that my energy system shut down. So I'd absorbed it from a place of containing. And then it's like, well, hold on, that doesn't make sense because it's not like me to faint or not be present and not kind of get around. So only after that point in time, it became apparent that because of my energy healing abilities, I was unknowingly at that point in time then shielding and protecting whatever that environment and that kind of experience was. And then later on, it's I can contain other environments and I can see things and I can do other things that aren't necessarily related to that. So that became a basically an override of my own system, and then my own system then shut down. But then I wasn't aware of it, but yet I was opening up that skill set that had historically been there from the past. So that experience then led to me understanding, well, hold on, my energies are kind of stronger than actually I think they are, and there's something else at play that isn't kind of what you classify as a normal experience. So then once that had all happened, obviously the rest of the birth was fine, and once again it was another C-section, but that in itself was fine. So then at that point, I've then gone on the next leg of my journey for the next 3 years, where I've been in touch and in tune with those energies, and then going down the educational route and going to Reiki, Reiki 1, 2, and Master. Then only at that point did it then become apparent that if I look back at all these other experiences, this is why I'm now having to unlock higher levels of basically capability on the energy front. So that is where we have the lived experience. We don't understand what is happening necessarily at the time, but it becomes apparent further down the line when you look back on it. So then, having gone through that experience and having started to look after myself better and everything else, I got obviously divorced from mum and basically found out that when I was doing obviously my own proceedings, that there was a couple of legislations that were in there that I wasn't aware of. So it wasn't just your standard things. So there was a reason why it was kind of a long drawn out process because we hadn't nailed everything that I had to clear up. And there was one act or chapter in there that basically said that if you go back to 1826, I think it was, then
Six.
everything,
There's the
so
26 popping
yeah.
up.
So anything that is hers is actually mine, right? And
Right.
it's a really weird thing, but if you actually have a look at the law and the legislation, so we must have been married in a past life, right? So we're obviously karmically in this lifetime clearing some stuff up, but there was this clause that meant everything that was hers is mine,
Hmm.
right? which then ties back to what I said earlier of the energy healing side of things and being in my aura. So her pain became my problem energetically because of this clause from a past life where we were married.
Oh my
So in
God.
this lifetime, we had to get married. We then had to have kids. We
And he
then
told
had
you
to
all
get
this, obviously.
divorced. She's not
But
open to it, so
that's so.
I mentioned it and then left it basically.
Why does
So
she think you're cuckoo?
yeah, but it makes perfect sense when you have all of the pieces of this jigsaw, right?
Yeah.
So, but that at that point it changed how I looked at everything, and I realized that you literally see and experience very little of what's actually happening from a physical story perspective. So basically, we had to then get married to get divorced in order to then cancel the contract that was still in play from a past lifetime
Right.
so that her stuff was no longer my stuff. So
Right.
then when we go back, it's like when she was getting obviously the epidural and being stabbed, that was basically I had to take that energy through this contract from some past life contract, soul contract or
It
whatever.
wasn't pain.
No. So
That's
it's
not good.
basically the energy transfer of what's yours is mine,
Yeah.
but I was tied to it unknowingly from
Yeah.
the past life. So that had to be cleared out in this lifetime. But obviously, my experience at the time that wasn't known was that anything that was hers was mine. So the way I wasn't looking after myself and the way that obviously my own alignment was out the window and why I was doing everything, like running around school trips, obviously driving here, there, and everywhere, paying all the bills, and that's because of this contract from the past life.
Mm.
And that contract then had to end in this life because otherwise it's going to run the rest of my life moving forwards. So that then cleared obviously itself out that way.
Mhm.
But you're not going to be living your day to day thinking any of this stuff is actually going on in the background. And half of this stuff you're probably not even aware of. And half of this stuff you don't even know because it hasn't yet occurred yet where you've had this meeting with somebody. So it gets interesting then beyond
Good to
that.
know. Don't need to know.
No. But if you have to then obviously come out of these contracts, you'll get presented with the opportunities to then do so. So you don't necessarily have to be aware of it, but as long as it's on your path, it will have to be cleared for you to take your next steps. So that then cleared all of that out. Then I had to then go on obviously my own rest of my growth journey. And then that then got me into the whole sort of just expanding my gifts. And then I got into another relationship and then had a kind of whole plethora of things, but I won't go too far into that because that's past lives as well. But it's not relevant to obviously your earlier point.
Mhm.
So when we have the whole relationship second time round, obviously there wasn't like a marriage or anything, so there's no contract at play here. But there is a past life overlap from my work in terms of doing kind of black magic, and I refer to it as black magic because that's how it was known at the time. But it's all of these weird, wacky
But
gifts
black
and
magic
healings
is
and
kind of evil devil
yeah,
magic,
but
isn't it?
but historically it's been known
Or
that way.
incorrect words. So black magic would be anything that isn't true or saying untruths, like a lie is black magic, isn't it?
So black magic is anything you can't justifiably make sense of. So if
Right.
I'm doing energy healing, that's some witchy voodoo black magicy stuff. But it's because you don't understand at the time, and we're talking
What it is.
like 1800s beyond 1600s witchcraft, all this other stuff.
And they were all drowned
Anybody
or
with
burnt
gifts,
or.
yeah. So you've got the persecution aspect
Hmm.
that then carries through the generations from the cellular side because you're slightly more advanced, but society at the time doesn't know that it's even
Understand
possible
it.
and it's not widely accepted. So therefore, you have to find a way of minimizing it or containing it or making it something that people shouldn't be doing in order to shut it down. And then this comes back to our thing from earlier of it's easier to shut it down than to run with it and realize there's more out there.
Hmm.
So then it became a case of there was an overlap there. But in this lifetime, obviously, I had to get with the person to then go and clear some karmic stuff from the past. But one of the things that wasn't able to be worked out was the fact that her dad in this lifetime used to work with her and I and her mum in this lifetime, in past lifetimes, and I broke out and away from all of that negative side of the black magic and the voodoo. So, in doing so, in this lifetime, I was diagnosed after the birth of my first child with a syndrome called Stickler syndrome. And if you have a look at Stickler, it actually goes back to Romanian, I believe, and it just means glass or fragile, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what then happens is I get this syndrome in this lifetime. I then eventually meet the person and the people from the past lifetime, but one of them isn't in this lifetime because they passed away in 2016 when my stuff first started to break down. So literally October, November of 2016, they passed away and it opened up all of my past life stuff that I would then later go on to meet some of the people that were also part of that thing in the past life. So I didn't get to meet her dad in this lifetime because he transitioned in 2016. But then that started opening up all of my past lifetime problems for me to resolve in this lifetime. Then 4 years after that, or 3, 4 years after that, I met obviously the twins' mum in order to then reconcile all of these other bits that were associated with that original awakening in 2016. And then because of the overlap from the past lifetimes, I then had to have the twins, and in case she couldn't correct the past lifetime to this lifetime. And what it was is it was around SA, so sexual abuse, and there was a case of in this lifetime there were problems with that side of the lineage because of them being partners in a past lifetime. So without going too far into it, it was then a case of the twins are then symbolic of myself in this lifetime and my look in this lifetime and my character in this lifetime
Mm-hmm.
and how closely matched it was to her father in the past lifetime. So what she can't do is she can't then distinguish between the two people, which is why they were practically identical twins.
Right.
So on the face of it, there's not really there's obviously one set of twins in like my wider family, but
Mhm.
it's not kind of a generic like you have twins regularly. So the reason for them being twins was to give a signal as to this overlap. And if it wasn't ever then going to be reconciled, then the twins then mirror that unreconciled thing throughout the rest of the lifetime. So she'll have to revisit it at some point, but it's not something she's then dealt with me in order to clear the backlog. So because at that point we'd had the twins, and then kind of psychologically there was all this energy and past life at play, it meant that she wasn't able to deal with it. And then there was a kind of identity crisis at some point, and then there was a kind of unraveling of that experience from a place of us being together that then meant that we had to then go our separate ways because it was then detrimental for her and her growth, whereby she wasn't ready to deal with it. And we then had a hypnotherapy experience that was kind of really late on in the day. And that was, I think it was September of 22. And basically, she had a connection then with her dad during this experience, but it kind of tipped her too far. So basically, from a psychosis perspective and the psychological perspective, because the person then can't handle it, it means that everything around it then has to obviously neutralize itself. So that started opening it up. And then in the January of 2023, we went over and obviously saw family over in Romania, but visited her dad's grave. And I could find her dad's grave energetically, even though I'd never been there before, right?
You just had a
But
feeling you knew where it was. It was a massive
yeah,
graveyard. So.
so we literally pulled up, and I said, "Oh, I know where this is." And I literally walked around to the place where it was, and I said, "It's that thing over there." Obviously, I can't read Romanian, I can't read writing, but energies I can read.
Yeah.
So we then visited that, but I got within a few feet of it, and I literally hit this wall, literally, like like an energy wall. So it was like other people can walk in, but I can't go any further.
So you were just standing there, standing back,
So
and
I literally I went to take a step forward and I'm like bang, and I'm
you
like
bumped,
what the
you bumped your
like.
nose.
But obviously it's like an energy wall that's
Yeah,
literally like you can't pass.
it's
It's
not
not
good.
it's but
So,
you it's like it's as if time stops. It's not so much like you've hit some form of kind of material thing. It's as if you get there and time stops and resets, but you can't move any closer because of this resistance. So obviously I could be drawn as close to it as that, but then I wasn't allowed to go any further within that because of whatever it was for the reason. And then shortly after
what would
that,
the reason be? Like
it
angry,
will be a case of I've walked away from it in the past life. So why would it now allow me
allowed,
back in?
right?
So part of that's me going, I'm not going back into it, and part of that's them going, oh, hold on, there's a
No, you're
problem,
not.
right?
Yeah.
So you can then at that point get into like family constellations, I think is the technical term for it in this lifetime. It's where you can have random people play different random family members, and all they do is they interact with each other based on energies in a tiny little room. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but
Right.
at that point, that became apparent that that was a thing. So it's like you can't move beyond this energy, even though like you should be able to move freely. So it was playing out all of those dynamics. And then shortly after we came back, it was a case of the trauma from the past lives that overlapped into this lifetime then started playing out. And then it just became too much of a problem that obviously I had to then leave. So, because of the whole projection element and the lack of distinguishing and the psychosis, if
Mhm.
you can't then distinguish between this lifetime and a past lifetime and your own experience and somebody else's experience, then it becomes detrimental to everybody involved. So this is why some of the work that I do has a lot of heavy backing to it, because you have to take people to a point whereby their identity gets challenged, because they have to clear and heal and resolve all of their karmic ties, their past life stuff. And the deeper it is, the more the psychosis is. And this is why some people don't work with psychosis, because they don't understand that all of this stuff is playing out behind the scenes. And the person literally can't distinguish between what's right now and what they're resolving from past. And the two can then merge into this current moment to then be resolved. But you have to have somebody able to understand it to help them beyond and through that point. Otherwise, it becomes just a constant shutdown, and then the body restricts, and then that's you're basically then having to force the issue or run away from it. So at that point, it then became obvious that that was the turning point. So either she would have got over that because I've got the skill set to help her through it, or she doesn't move beyond it, and therefore the twins have to take over because they're now going to mirror it however they mirror it because it wasn't dealt with at the front end. So I couldn't deal with it with her and her father. Sorry, that's wrong. Her father and her couldn't deal with it. Then I got involved when he passed. So 2016, it opened my energy up for it. 4 years, 4 years later, I came into the frame. I couldn't then help her with it. So therefore, I'm now out, her father's out. So the twins then have to come in order to help her through it, but over a longer period of time that isn't as intense.
Right.
And then based on that, I have to go my way because technically my contract and my mission is to resolve that karma. If I then can't do it, I get moved on to whatever my next mission is and my next bit of karma and my next contract and then my business stuff that has to open up. But I can't obviously be held in having to help this other person deal with their stuff to balance my stuff. So technically, at that point, you have a void or a nullification of the contract, similar to how the divorce was also a nullification of a previous contract. So it's interesting how it all plays out. But obviously, I've now gone off on my way, and she'll have to either deal with it or run away from it for the rest of her life. But then that shouldn't then stop my development, my side, because I'm trying to get her to do something that balances that whole karmic thing out in behind the scenes. So then obviously I've gone on beyond that to then go into more of my stuff. and then had to have a look at my family background and have a look at where my learnings and things are still holding me back. But generally speaking, that's how me having kids has played out.
Right.
So there's a lot there.
So she's not your ex-wife, but she obviously thinks that this is all kind of cuckoo.
So the ex-wife is my early stage of my own growth and development. So if you have a look at it from an awareness perspective, my awareness at that time wasn't high enough for all of these new concepts that came in later on. So
Hmm.
if I say it to somebody who I was once aligned with, they're
Hmm.
not going to get it because they haven't gone through the rest of the journey to get that greater level of awareness that allows them then to take the new concepts in. Because once again, the subconscious is blocking it based on this is all we know and this is how we function, which is why I'm not there anymore because I've increased my frequency, increased my awareness, and therefore we don't have the same reality. So therefore we can't operate in the same space or the same proximity because we're not creating the same type of environment.
So the more you know, the frequency gets higher and higher, does it?
Yeah, yeah.
Are there loads of different levels of frequencies then?
You've got to
Like
remember that
different
frequency is just a
levels.
certain bandwidth. So you could be
Yeah.
a high bandwidth or you could be a slightly lower bandwidth. But we're looking at frequency in terms of the higher the bandwidth,
Hmm.
technically, the more along your journey you are. Because you've got less baggage, you've got less trauma, you've done more healing work, you have a greater level of awareness. You're no longer playing victim, you're actually providing and creating. And those energies have extremes. But then if you have a look at the charts that they have, you have like lower vibrations like fear and lack and all these other things. I can't think what the metric is. It's like a little funnel. Is it the
There's
power of
fear and
something?
excitement are supposed to be the same, right?
Yeah,
So, and it's the way you think about it. So if you're fearful, you can like channel that and make it into
yeah,
a productive kind of excitement. So if you're like going
hmm
on stage and presenting or something,
yeah.
you can channel that and then use it. So would that be the same frequency? You can just change it over to
It's your labeling
that
as such
works
of
with,
it. So you can have like a fear response, which is also an excitement response,
right?
but how you label it is based on your own conditioning.
Hmm.
So if you have somebody that's a lower vibration and they're in this fear and this lack and this survival, usually a coping mechanism would be something like alcohol. Because what you're doing is alcohol and courage is a higher
I used to
frequency,
always, yes, I always used to like drink for that reason. I was probably
yeah.
overexcited or smoke.
But
I was just like, or if I had the
yeah,
music on in the car, this is when I was a teenager, I'd be
yeah,
like chain smoking.
yeah.
It's
So if we if we
overexcited.
isolate, yeah, if we isolate alcohol, if your frequency is so low, you can use alcohol because it gives you courage, which is why they call it Dutch courage or they call it
Oh,
spirits,
right, okay.
right? Because what it does is it takes your frequency up from this lower vibration
Mm-hmm.
up to the vibration and the frequency of courage. Then you want to maintain that higher frequency so you continue to drink
Mm-hmm.
rather than dropping back to the frequency where you were before you started drinking. So the idea behind alcohol is
Manifestation is
to
supposed to
raise,
be like
yeah,
a kind of a love vibration, isn't it? So
yeah,
that excitement of being in love, which is like another level, that's
yeah,
supposed to be the frequency for manifestation, like
yeah.
until money
So you've
manifests.
got peace, love, you've then got
Mm.
enlightenment, which are all the higher sort of
Okay.
purpley blue areas. But
Is that the
the
whole time? Constant? You're
you
on that
you can't
vibration or do
maintain a
you fall off
constant
it?
frequency. It's kind of impossible to maintain it because you
Right.
have all of these external stimulus. It becomes like if you take a monk, for instance, they're pretty chill, right? Yeah, it's going to take a lot to annoy them.
And wise.
So chances are, right, they're in a level of frequency that you either aren't going to attract because you can't reach that frequency and it's not within your bandwidth, i.e. slightly above and slightly below your frequency, because you'll average out with
It's
people
like
that are
a
slightly above you.
joyful, kind of peaceful
Yeah,
frequency, isn't it? Just
yeah,
at peace, at one, in the moment frequency. That
yeah,
is the frequency that you want, isn't it? Which is supposed to
yeah,
be the same as the high frequencies,
yeah.
like love and
But but the highest frequency, which is what they're not told and what we're not told as a collective, is authenticity.
Right. So
You
congruent
can't
with
you
your,
can't touch, you try and touch somebody that's genuinely authentic because you've got nothing to play on. They're not covered, they're not wearing masks, they're not showing up inauthentically, they're not playing to certain roles and certain storylines. So you don't have anywhere to
completely
go.
transparent
Yeah.
and
Because
congruent with
if
yourself.
somebody's got a trauma or a problem, you can take them out of their frequency by triggering the trauma or the problem.
Right.
Somebody who's authentic doesn't have the issue of I'm wearing this mask and somebody could uncover it. It's literally this is me, this is who I am. You can't touch that
So this the
because
whole thing of like be it till you see it kind of thing, like be the person you want to be kind of thing. Is that being authentic? You're
as long as that's genuinely not
practicing.
another mask, then yes, that works perfectly. So if I believe, or well, technically a belief is the lie that you tell yourself that is not knowing, right? So if I know that I'm meant for more and I'm meant for bigger and I'm meant for whatever this path is for me, then all I have to do is go, what would that future version of me be doing? So that's authentic. If somebody's going, well, hold on, I'm this big I am, and I've got all of this stuff, and it's material, and I've got all this money, and my goals aren't authentically aligned, then even if I pretend to be that, it's never going to materialize because it's not genuine.
Mhm.
So I can't get there, even if I'm going to tell myself that's what I am. So you have to have the pathway as such set up so that you can actually become the thing.
Mhm.
Otherwise, technically, you're still being inauthentic
So
because you're pretending to be
you have
something that
to
you're not.
imagine it in, like in your timeline, going back to NLP.
Mhm.
Imagining your timeline, imagining the person that you want to be, and seeing how far away it is, and
Yeah,
so if it's within reach, I like you can imagine it. So if you can imagine it, that means that you basically in NLP means you can have it. If you can imagine it, then it or in quantum physics, it's already if you can imagine it, it's already kind of existing, isn't it? But in your imagination.
yeah, but then you've created a growth gap, and
Yeah.
the question is, how far along that growth gap can you actually attain? Because a lot of people will go, "Oh yeah, I'm this millionaire and I've got this lavish lifestyle," but they don't realize how much work that's involved to bridge that gap. It's not as much as let me just get a digital product out and sell X amount of copies of it, because that in itself will give you growth and learning lessons. What
Mhm.
happens if that digital product is meant to work, but it's not meant to work until you've been at it for 3 years, right? Then it's all of a sudden, right, I'm this big I am millionaire and I've got all this other stuff, and that's what I kind of enjoy
About the
doing, and
journey,
that's
isn't
what I
it,
want
though?
to be. Yeah, but some people then won't ever take that journey, even though they can imagine it. So it's that it's possible, but you
The
still
belief
have to
that it
put
can be
the
real.
work in. Yeah.
Yeah. Not
So so
not
you
being fearful of it.
so you can be delusional, right? There's nothing wrong with being delusional.
Right.
However, you have to take the steps towards being delusional after you've been delusional.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go, well, hold on, I want the stuff, but I just expect it to be there. But they don't realize the amount of personal development work that they have to go through. It's not like I can just switch it on. I'm used to a 60 grand job and now I'm used to 10 grand a month. There is an identity shift that has to occur, and there is this process of life, and there is this journey that you have to go along. So it's one thing going, yep, I can visualize and I can NLP myself through this is what I'm going to do. But if you're not destroying the structures and you're only programming moving forward, then you get voices in your head again,
Hmm.
right? Because it's so and so told me this wasn't possible, but I haven't dealt with it. But now somebody as an NLP practitioner is telling me that everything is possible if I put my mind to it.
Yeah, but then they
So
can
I've,
print the memory, they
yeah,
can delete the memory, they can like kind of sculpt the memory into parts,
yeah. But then what
like
you're
a
doing is you're
tweak of it,
technically
change the
creating
color,
fragments.
get rid of it, swish
So if
it.
you so if you think about it, if you're splitting it off, you're fragmenting. But then
Hmm.
what are all those fragments actually attached to from a thought process perspective? Because then if you're going to
Very
separate
good.
and fragment or break them down or take them away, then you have the rest of the lived experience up until the point of the NLP that's all interconnected with all of that other stuff. So it's not so much a case of, oh yeah, we're just going to get rid of this one thing. You have to redesign everything from a place of how people understand things work.
Mhm.
Otherwise, in theory, you're only doing part of a job and you leave that person with a problem because they can't then still align with the NLP stuff that you're programming because they now don't have the basic functioning. And language is one of the first things that goes if you ever play around with the mental construct. Because language isn't used the same way once you've done a bit of work than it is when you're just existing.
So that hence the linguistic bit,
Yeah,
neuro-linguistic programming.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're talking basic, like somebody's speech is the first thing that will go. They'll be like, well, I thought of it this way, but I can't actually physically speak it in that way anymore because it doesn't wire and fire that way. So
Right.
they have to relearn that. And what I've learned from my side is if I use I, you, we, they, us, it's a mirror, not an actual conversation with the person. So then you have to know, is it me mirroring to me, or is it me mirroring onto them, or is it them mirroring onto me, or them mirroring themselves somewhere else? Because you have first, second, and third person perspectives within the language. And we're not taught these perspectives other than how we construct the language, not how we apply the language. So if I say I know it has to be me.
Mhm.
But if I'm going I and I don't have this inward thing and I go I, then I have a disconnect from body language to actual language. Because my body language should mirror the fact that I is myself and myself only. So everything action wise should be inward.
Mhm.
If it's like you, well, hold on, you're pointing at somebody else. But if you realize if you point at somebody else like that, there's three fingers pointing back at you on either side, and there's only two. One's pointing forward and one's pointing up. So if anything, you're talking about yourself from a place of if you point at somebody. But we don't understand it that way and we project outwardly because the language is the problem. So whenever we use language, it's a problem because it's interpretable based on how you were taught to apply it yourself, not based on how it actually functions at the source and at the root cause. And this is why you can have a conversation with somebody and be on two different conversations, even though you're in the same conversation. Because they're doing something in their head
Really? Yeah.
that you're not necessarily doing in yours. And then you wonder why you have an argument, or you wonder why you fall out, or you wonder why somebody took the wrong end of the stick.
They're not
And then you
understanding.
try and correct it, but you're correcting it with the same language that's going to cause them a problem. And then this then spirals off into all of this other stuff. So you can have the original modality. Like somebody could go to NLP and just need NLP to take the next step. Brilliant. But somebody could go to NLP to understand that NLP isn't the answer to the problem and creates a problem to then get to the answer.
Yeah, so people won't know about these
So
past lives, it's kind of
no,
level when they come to
no,
you
no.
at all.
Like
But
the so
how will
go
they accept that then? If they're not kind of into that kind of thing.
so you have to gauge the person and it might take
Yeah.
a couple of sessions.
They may
But
not
if I
tell
I've
them
now tied
necessarily.
yeah, you can tell them that, but they will have the realization themselves that it isn't this lifetime. And the
Okay.
fact that they've had the experience of it's me talking to you, but I've never been there,
Hmm.
right? They then have to then go with the hold on, I now have to make sure this is safe. So I now have to open up and accept that there are past lifetimes because it hasn't happened in my recollection of
Because
this
they're
lifetime.
talking from the subconscious, so it's the subconscious talking,
Yeah.
and these
It's
memories are
basically
about.
you're doing your own investigation work. You've just got somebody outside of you that can prompt you.
Hmm.
So it's not the other person opening you up to the fact that there was a past life. It's you opening yourself up to the fact that you had a past life and you're now bringing it in to your awareness.
Hmm.
So I'll tie, I said this would come up, so I'm glad it did. But if I now tie this back to the other experience
Oh,
that
yeah.
I mentioned
Okay.
from obviously the childhood and like the children's side,
Yeah.
obviously I think it was 2021, 2022. I had a lady come to me and she had failed IVF. So she had two or three attempts that were failed and didn't know what it was. But obviously, when I heard her story, I was like, oh, hold on, something in me was like, yeah, there's something here. So we had a session and did hypnotherapy, and she had PCOS and endometriosis that she developed at the age of 22 in this lifetime at university, about 2 weeks before she met her now husband in this lifetime, right? So that in itself was like, well, hold on, you're protecting yourself against some energy structure here. So obviously she then couldn't have children, but obviously the physical way of not having children is usually tied to PCOS endometriosis because that's how it manifests in the body for you then to go and do the background work. So we explored and obviously had this session, and I went back with her to her childhood, and I went back with her further than her childhood, and we ended up in Louisiana in 1840. And because we went back to Louisiana in 1840, she was like, I'm in this like house or this barn, and it's not this lifetime. At that moment, she had then opened herself up to past lives. So the fact she was talking to me during the hypnotherapy was just me being a facilitator, basically. But for her to show herself that, hold on, there's something more going on here than meets the eye. So as long as I, as the facilitator, provide the safe space and she feels safe, she can then explore all of that herself. And that's what we then did throughout the rest of the session. But what had transpired is that there was a guy and a lady in the field opposite. It's in like one of those red, white barn type things that you see in sort of some of the films that are very much dated and very much time stamped.
Mhm.
And this guy was constantly looking out the window and over the way, and she was a bit creeped out and
Yes.
weirded out by it. And basically, what then happened was one time her daughter was playing out in the field and she was asleep, or she fell asleep, and she was meant to go out with the daughter and didn't. So, what then happened is this guy that was over in the barn opposite had then, while she was sleeping, gone and killed the daughter. So what then happened is they've instantly at that point created some karmic bond or contract between each other that if you take a life, you have to pay a life back. However, come fast forward to this lifetime, her body has shut off to the energy of the guy from the past lifetime, who's actually the husband in this lifetime. So
So
what has happened is they've been brought back together at university. Her body's set up to, I need to protect the child, because energetically, this is what's going on in the background. But ultimately, they have to have a child in this lifetime to balance the karmic debt between the two souls or three souls as part of this contract from the past life. So then we worked through all of this stuff and we got back to the fact of that's what happened. And then I basically gave her this script, so similar to NLP, but obviously you can just play it in the background. So if you fall asleep, you're just constantly exposing and repeating it to the brain. And we came up with this ideal scenario of how she wanted her life to go based on her understanding of what had happened in the past and how she thought she was protecting the child in this lifetime, but ultimately she wasn't protecting through any other means than I'm not bringing the child in. But that doesn't protect the child because it doesn't expose the child to the father in this lifetime protecting the child, whereas the guy from the past lifetime didn't protect that child. So in any sort of other circumstance, technically all she's doing is she's blocking the completion of this process that should then work out and play out to balance all of their karma and therefore be perfectly fine moving forwards. So gave her this script and she constructed it based on she wanted to be pregnant before her birthday. Then we went through all of like the ins and outs of kind of all of the standard sort of, oh yeah, here's me doing the sort of baby room, here's me decorating it, here's me doing all this other stuff. And then we worked out that based on the days, she followed it to within 7 days of actually having the child. And she was pinpoint to 7 days. So I can't remember if it was before or after, but then she phoned me one afternoon, and this was obviously the week before. And basically, I think she was walking her dog at the time, and she was in a field, and she started having these pains. And I literally said to her, it's like, no, you're starting to have contractions. that mean that obviously this process is starting. So you need to go home. You need to obviously get your husband. You need to get down the hospital. And I didn't hear anything from her for then obviously about a day and a half, 2 days. And then she phoned me, I think it was 2 days later, but she'd left the hospital and she'd come out and she was in hysterics, like, oh, well, what do I do? How do I behave as a mum and all this other stuff? And it's like this is all of her stuff from the past life of I've let myself down because I didn't care for the child. And this all was playing out literally in real time. So we then had to obviously go over all of these other structures. And then the tipping point for her was the moment I said to her, you are aware you've left your baby with the guy that we know from the past life obviously took the life. And at that point, everything energetically just went. And because that was the
That's
root cause application of this whole process that then played out over those 9 months, then literally at that moment, she's like, oh, so I balanced everything. And then I didn't hear anything else from her. So I know baby's fine, I know mum's fine, I know dad's doing fine. But obviously at that point, that was me done from my side and me guiding through. And that was them balancing everything on their side so that they could obviously then go on to do what they're doing with their life and away from that. But that moment on the phone where she literally went, oh, it was if everything just balanced. And that's the power of some of the work that's done based on the
can you
fact
feel
that,
that energy shift or whatever?
yeah,
Just can't.
yeah, but she's phoned me with one energy signature and I've
Yeah.
interacted with her with my energy signature. Now her energy signature's changed. And from my side, I get that drop off where
Okay.
it's like you're no longer resisting, you're at ease. And
Yeah.
that drop off means you've stepped back. So you've created distance between me. I'm not needed anymore because you've done your work. And then in you stepping back, you've stepped more towards your stuff. And then that leaves me to go off in the other direction. But then that in itself was a learning curve because it's like people can come and go. If
Mhm.
you're held on and you've got this attachment to people, you can't let people come and go. And that's part of coaching. That's
Yeah.
part of all this entrepreneurial work, the development work. So I even had my lessons within that storyline that wasn't technically my storyline. So when you have a look at how these pieces actually come together, there's a lot more at play than you think. And it's some big mosaic that's perfectly orchestrated. And you're just waiting for that orchestration just to play that tune. And then you just kind of frequency alignment and harmonize with it and then run forward.
Yeah. It's not boring at all, is it?
No, but that's why I love doing what I do and niching
Yeah.
down as we started off with. It's like I get people who have all their issues and their problems and diversity, but
Mhm.
me doing one specific thing just takes away from the whole excitement of what it is that I do.
Mhm.
So I have to do it, but I will be expanding it at some point.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, it's just for marketing purposes, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
the
so
messaging,
you have
it's
something
just
to want to
applied to a
go.
business founder, but it applies to
Yeah,
everywhere in life, and that's the beauty.
yeah, yeah. Great. So how long have we been going now? 20
About
past
an hour,
four. About an
about
hour.
the same.
About the
Um,
same.
yeah,
We can have a
hour 20.
weekly podcast then, do you think?
Well, like I said to you, it's like I'm quite happy just coming on having chats, and if there's
Yeah.
anything that you kind of need to discuss or want to discuss, or even if it's personal, I think there's a
Okay.
lot of value in
So
that,
my estranged father,
right?
will that be something to do with some unfinished business from the past? Like it was a really silly reason for him doing this. I don't want to go too far into that, but it's been about sort of 7, 8 years now, something like that. And I keep trying and
So
approaching him
it's
to
yeah, if you refer to it as estranged, then you have to go, why have I labeled it that? Because if I don't understand what that label is actually meaning,
yeah.
then I can't work out whether or not I need to close that gap or walk away from that gap. Because you have
I've
the two
tried again
sides.
recently, and I'm just like, well, I think I've drawn a line in the sand and just move on now because it's just like I keep trying, and it's like a ridiculous reason why he's always done this. ever since I was a child, he used to like not speak for a couple of years, or because my mother
But
left
but
him when
but
I
you
was
but
6 months
you
old.
have to then look at it one from his side and two from your side.
Mhm.
So if there's a part of you that's attached, you're going to make the effort.
Mhm.
But if you're not meant to be attached and you shouldn't have the attachment, you're going to have rejection because the rejection is going to teach you to detach and have no attachment.
Yeah, I'm
But
basically there now.
you're
I
but
can't
you're
try anymore.
look yeah, but you're looking to enforce the attachment, whereas the lesson is to detach.
Right, yeah.
But it's played out in a rejection type manner.
Yeah, I'm past being rejected now. No, I'm
Yeah,
detaching now.
yeah.
Although
But
he's going to see he's seen my son and he wants to see my daughter, but the, forgiving him for not being a grandfather for all that time, there's that as well. But it's just like, okay,
yeah,
see see the
but your
grandkids.
energy signature is
Yeah.
going to be playing out certain dynamics. So if you wanted to take control of your life and your experience, that's one way of looking at it. If you want to take control of how do I look at the whole experience so that I'm actually understanding where everybody's coming from, that's an even greater perspective to have. And the
Mhm.
reason being is because your energy signature could have been keeping him away from the grandchildren. As much as you may or may not want to look at it that way,
Mhm.
but it's because of your story about you having to detach. But your story about having to detach doesn't necessarily have any bearing
It
on
wasn't my
him
choice
with
to
other
detach.
people.
Ecologically, I didn't want to detach because obviously because I had the children, but
Exactly.
it
But
was his
you can
decision. It was
detach.
he did it. I
Yeah. But you can detach and he can still have a relationship with the children.
he could have done.
Yeah. But if you haven't at that point detached,
I
your
didn't want to
attachment,
detach.
yeah, but your attachment at that time, if it's still unresolved, means that he can't attach to the children because you haven't detached to allow the other attachment. And it's a weird way of looking at it.
So I'm detaching now, but he's actually attaching to,
Correct.
well, he's
So you've now
my son
gone,
and he's
I
my
don't
daughter.
want to attach to you, so you can attach to them.
That's what's happening now. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's how you know that you're playing the dynamic out correctly because the chain works even if you're in or out of it.
My sister has like excluded me from like, well, I mean, there's been two like family weddings I've been excluded from because my father was going to be there, so I wasn't invited kind of thing.
Yep.
So it's not just him, it's my sister and then his
But
sister.
you've also got the fact of you're doing some of that. So the opportunity is there for the wedding,
I
right?
wasn't invited, but my children weren't invited or my husband
Right.
wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. But if we step back, the opportunity is there for the wedding. It's easy for you to say yes and show up, isn't it?
I wasn't invited.
No, no. If all things being equal, right? Let's say we're not going to put a story onto it.
Uh-huh.
There's a wedding. It's easy for you just to show up, isn't it? All things
I'm
being,
invited.
all things being neutral. So the story is I'm uninvited. So if we neutralize it, right? There's a wedding going on. You can go to it.
I
That's
can't,
how it
I
should.
wouldn't.
So,
And
so
it's two,
this is
that's my godson as well, my
right.
sister's son.
But this is why I
He weren't invited.
watching how these things play out,
They
right?
would have loved me to
So
just rock up.
if everything was true and accurate and normal and fine, there's a wedding going on in the family and you can show up to it. That's how it should play out.
Yes.
Right. So that's what we're aiming for, or some form of that, right? On a normal scale, right? Anything that isn't that, when we now start talking about it, is the story that layers it. And that's where the work comes in, because that's where your healing and your growth is and all your lessons are. So on a standard normal day, there's a wedding going on in the family and you can show up, right? You now can't show up. So there's a story now.
Would I have
So
not invited
why?
them in a past life or
Right.
something like that? Do you
So
think?
so I don't think it's that simple. I think there's a different, right? So I'm not invited, right? Is the story that now gets layered onto it, right? So if you're not invited, what does that actually mean? Have you invited yourself or have you blocked yourself from going? Because nobody else outside of it is doing anything other than subconsciously interacting with your energy signature. So if you've got this, I'm attached, but I should be detached, your energy signature is fighting with itself. So it's going to present you with an opportunity, and then it's going to say, you shouldn't be in that opportunity, and it's going to show you both,
It's like a self-destruct type thing,
right?
but
Yeah.
subconscious.
But your first thought is going to be, oh my God, I've been rejected. Oh my God, there's a wedding going on and I'm not allowed. I'm
Yeah,
not
really
invited.
upset.
Right? But your lesson is not having that as your story. Your lesson is, I'm not meant to be with those people because I'm not aligned there anymore. Therefore, it's feeding into my I should be detached story. But I'm still attached because I want to be part of the wedding, right? So it's showing you, it's basically dangling the carrot and saying, are you going to take a bite? Or are you going to realize the carrot's there, but you don't want the carrot? But in this case, it's a wedding cake, right?
So it's
But
this acceptance. I mean, I have to accept it, and I've accepted it.
uh, yeah, but you've got that opportunity there because your energy signature's going, let me test what identity she's actually going to show up as. Is it going to be the old identity whereby I should be included and maybe I wasn't included in the past and I'm playing all of these dynamics out? Or is it a case of I know that that's not where I should be and I should be doing something different because that's then where all of my kind of karma
Yeah.
chain.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, people's actions is a reflection of them, not of me. So
Sure.
them not inviting me is a reflection of them, not of me. So
At a
they're
low
not muddying me,
basic level,
but people
yes.
assume that I've done something wrong. I haven't actually. But it's like that's a
So
reflection of them, isn't it?
yeah, so that's a reflection of them, but you refer to it as a reflection, not a projection. So because your language uses
Yeah.
a reflection, you have to now invert it. So it's
Yeah.
actually your reflection.
So that I'm seeing it how.
You're seeing yourself on their circumstance, their event, their person. Because otherwise you wouldn't say it's a reflection, you'd say it's a projection.
Okay.
So the inverse of reflection is projection. So you could have come in and gone, I'm projecting onto the wedding, but I've got this lesson whereby I'm interacting with dad and I'm trying to connect, but I should be disconnected. That's one way of saying it correctly. Otherwise, if it becomes a reflection based on the fact it's their actions, we ignore the fact that somebody somewhere has created that event so that all of this dynamic can play out. So you have a part in that, but the only way you can do some work is if you realize that I've said it's a reflection, but I think it's them doing it. That's disconnected because that's now disempowered you. Because you're now going, you're not going to go in front of a mirror and go, oh my God, I can see my other person doing this to me. No, you can see your own reflection. The mirror just becomes the wedding. The mirror just becomes dad. The mirror just becomes whoever. But because psychologically you've got it listed as a reflection, it's you going, hold on, I'm looking at it wrong. I'm
Mhm.
looking at a part of me that's out there that needs to be changed so that I can then go, it's them taking that action, it's not me choosing that. And then in that instance, you walk away because you go, they can do what they want and I'm letting them and I'm doing what I want.
Mhm.
And I'm not going there anyway, so it doesn't matter if you invite me or not. And I've
It's
had
in
the
the
same
past
thing.
now.
Yeah. But I've had the same thing. It's like, hold on, I've been to every event. My wedding, I invited you, and yet your
Yeah.
wedding, you've ignored me. And you come up with this random excuse. Well, I'm not meant to be there. But it's easy for me to go and be there, but then I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. So what am I going to pick? Do I want to be somewhere where I've always been or somewhere where I'm going?
Mhm.
And then that becomes the discussion point. But then because you've then stepped away and you're now where you should be, everybody else can then go where they should be
And with other people,
and with other people.
energy,
So
different.
if anything, the fact that you have now done the detachment has
Mhm.
facilitated your father having a relationship with his grandchildren.
That's weird, isn't it?
And yet you don't look at it that way. So if
I've only
anything,
just kind of right accepted it and been like,
yeah,
I'll give it one last try then.
right. But
Not ready. Okay.
you stepping away has opened up the space for somebody else to have a relationship with other people that wouldn't necessarily have been there if you were looking for the relationship that was the void.
But is there a reason why that father was never really a father? Probably, some people have
Yes,
close. He's
because
never been, close. He's close to my older sister, who's
yeah,
5 years older. Um, but we've never had a close relationship.
but
Something.
think of all of the lessons and all of the ways and experiences you've had that have meant that they've played out that way because of him not being there.
Mhm.
So you as a entrepreneur, you as a how you show up every day, right? Some of those
The reason
traits
to earn, yeah. So
you'd
otherwise,
learn from the male being there. But what if you've learnt them from the male not being there,
yeah.
right? But if your experience was the other way round, I wouldn't be sat here facing this version of Emily today,
Mhm.
right? So we can say this person wasn't there, but what if you said to the person, look, I need to learn these lessons backwards. If you're there, you can teach me them, but if you're not there, I have to learn them the hard way,
And it's all
right?
going to happen. It's
But
all.
it's designed that way. And the moment you then go, hold on, I've learned all my lessons, you'll go, well, hold on, I can see that person for who they are because I'm this person who I am. And a lot of people never get to that stage because they're playing this projection reflection mirror game and not even knowing who they are to begin with. So you can step back and go, well, hold on, I like these traits in that person. This person not being there, they've got those traits, but I learnt them. Now I value them more. Now I can see that they're using them and I've now placed that value in them, and that in itself reconciles the relationship with self initially and then other. And then you open the door for, well, hold on, I don't need to get involved in this. I don't need to interfere here. I can go off and
He didn't
impact all these
say. He
other
didn't
lives
say
through a
I'm not.
podcast, for
He didn't
instance.
say no. He said I'm not ready yet.
Right,
For
but
God's sake,
that's not on you then, is it?
no.
The fact that you've now walked away means he can step forward. The fact that you weren't walking away meant he's got nowhere to go. So once again, you've opened up the door, metaphorically
In the chat.
speaking, for him to move when he's ready.
Right.
You've gone, you can take a step forward whenever you're ready, because I've taken a step back. Now it's not on me because I'm positioned where I should be. It's up to you to now reconcile your stuff, but I'm not going to be affected whether you do or don't, because I'm where I should be.
Mhm.
If I'm here, I'm not where I should be. Obviously, on the camera, it's slightly different, right? But if I'm stood here and you're stood here and we're not getting anywhere, then what happens if I go, hold on, I don't need this anymore? He can now go, I'm not ready yet. Right, you're not ready to take that step. Here, you can be not ready and have nowhere to go. But you've gone, when you're ready, take the step and I'll be here.
Mhm. And is this all to do with his childhood as well?
Yes. But that's his lessons, his
Yeah.
learning, because you have learned your stuff and you've applied it.
Mhm.
Now he has to learn his stuff and apply it. Then he can meet you where you are
Mhm.
because you've done the same learning. But you're not attached to the outcome. If he gets there, great. If he doesn't, great. You've done your stuff. You don't need to worry about it. But you've gone, take the step when you're ready. And when he's ready, you'll also be ready because you're already ready because you've done the work to get ready. Ugh.
I do feel ready now.
Right,
I don't feel
but
emotional
we
about it because I,
yeah,
the emotion's gone because I have dealt with that emotion
yes. But the emotion is the guidance system,
or yeah, yeah.
right? If you've got feelings or emotions, they're a guidance system.
Mhm.
and you're going to go away from pain and towards pleasure,
Yeah.
usually, until that structure's messed up and you associate pleasure with pain. In which case, then you have bigger problems and there's a lot of work to be done. But all we're
That
doing
was
is
an
we're
interesting
going,
thing, actually. I listened to the other day, I think it was James Daniels' podcast,
"Hmm,
that pet Satanists, I think it was, yeah, the Satanists see pain as love.
yeah, but
They inflict pain, but they see that as,
yeah, but it's an attention thing. But you have to remember how have they learnt it? It's not so much what they're doing. It's if they usually you have to, it's like if you have an abuser, they either become an abuser,
Mhm.
as in the person that was originally abused, or they do everything they can to protect everybody. But they're both extremes because it's not balanced still. There's still work to do on both sides of that structure. But if you have a look at a Satanist, chances are they've been conditioned that way. They've had experiences, they've had exposure to certain things, and therefore the only way they know it exists is in that form. So it's not downplaying it, it's not taking away from the fact it's happening and it's out there and whatever the stories are. What we're doing is we're understanding the person so that we can go, do we want that experience or not? Then that becomes a choice point. Where's your focus going? Because where
their
your
first
focus goes,
child,
your
I
energy
think,
flows.
yeah, their first child is sacrificed, the first
Yeah.
child, or to avoid that, they can change sex, something like that. If
Right.
they change the sex of the child,
Yeah,
then they're spared.
but you can apply
These
that to
celebrities.
every family. You can have a narcissistic household.
Mhm.
You can have the black sheep of the family,
Mhm.
right? That's just the odd one out. You can then have the roles that you play within the dynamic, the one who's sick, the one who like provides, the one who whatever it is, and you can have it's everywhere. But how we categorize it on the face of it just means that we segment and we don't look at the whole picture as usual.
Mhm.
But what we're looking at is it exists everywhere.
Mhm.
How we label it and how we associate with it is going to be specific to us as individuals. But if you have a look at any family dynamic, somebody fits into some specific role. And usually it's because the generation before has conditioned the generation after and nobody's put a stop to it.
Mhm.
And all you have to do is take out one generation and you lose all of that wisdom if somebody is doing it. So it's really easy to stop the process, but it's also really easy to maintain it.
When you say take out,
As in, take out a generation. If I
you
haven't met
like kill
my
them.
grandmother or grandfather, right, but yet my only experience has been mum and dad,
Uh-huh.
then that's where my generational line stems. Question is, how have they translated their experiences? But then I have to put their experiences onto the people that are before it because I never met them, so I don't know any different. Now all of a sudden you've got a perfectly working structure that goes way, 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 way back. And then you wonder why we have all these generational traumas and why all these lines carry it on. Well, if you haven't had the experience of the generation above, then you don't know and you don't have a way of understanding why the generation above you is how they are.
Well,
And then
they
you don't know how far back it goes unless you go, well, hold on, I'm doing everything opposite. But that in itself will create problems because you haven't balanced it. You've just done the other extreme. Now you know the goalposts. Now you have to find the balance point. So it's not like if you look at anything in the real world and go, it's this easy, it's black or white, it's up or down, it's not.
Mhm.
It is to work out the extremes. Then you have to work out the grey area, which is all of that gunk in between. But each individual's is not going to be perfectly in the middle. It's going to be some spectrum
Mhm.
of something.
Mhm.
But ultimately, on the grand scheme, everything itself balances out. So for how good you are, somebody else will be equally as troubled, and vice versa. And all we're doing is just looking to minimize that